Okay, we're going to simplify this rational expression. How do we start? Well, good rule of thumb is to always start by factoring the polynomials. So I'm going to take that numerator, 10p squared minus 4p, and I'm going to factor it. There's a bunch of ways we learned how to factor it. GCF, difference of squares, A times C method. What's the one we try first? We're going to try GCF first. I've got 10 and negative 4. What comes out of 10 and negative 4? Well, they're both even numbers, so I'd say a 2 comes out of both 10 and negative 4. And I've got a p times p in the numerator, or not the numerator, the first term, and a p in the second term, so I'm going to take a p out as well. 10 divided by 2 is 5. P squared divided by p is just p, minus 4 divided by 2 is 2. And p divided by p is just 1. So 5p minus 2 is leftover factor. How do I factor the denominator? 4p squared plus 2p. Well, again, what's the first technique that you always try first is GCF. So if I look at 4 and look at 2, I see that a 2 is the biggest thing that comes out of both those numbers. I also see there's a p squared plus p. So a p comes out of both the terms as well, leaving behind 2p plus 1. All right, so let's rewrite this rational equation now. So instead of the polynomial on top, I'm going to have the factored form of the polynomial, which is 2 times p times 5p minus 2. And the denominator, instead of the standard form, I'm going to have the factored form instead. So 2p times 2p plus 1. What cancels? Remember, the whole point of factoring is to make sure that things are multiplied so that they can cancel. Because when they're added and subtracted, they can't cancel. We can't cancel those p squareds, for example. But now that it's factored, I can cancel anything that's multiplied by everything else. So this 2 is multiplied by everything else, and that 2 is multiplied by everything else, which means that I should be able to cancel my 2's. This p is multiplied by everything else, and that p is multiplied by everything else. So I should be able to cancel my p's. This 5p minus 2 is multiplied by everything else, but there's no 5p minus 2 on the bottom. So I can't cancel that 5p minus 2. And the same goes for the 2p plus 1. It is multiplied by everything else, but there's no 2p plus 1 on the top. So I've got to leave that be. So what's my final simplified form? Everything that doesn't cancel has to go into my final answer. So 5p minus 2 and 2p plus 1 are the numerator and the denominator of my simplified fraction. And I am almost done. The one thing I have to check is my excluded value. So, not my excluded values. I have to check, this is what the problem says. The problem says that I have to restrict lost excluded values. So what excluded value did I lose? Well, it's the excluded value that came from the factor I canceled. I canceled the 2p. So what excluded value does 2p give me? Well, if I divide both sides by 2, I discover that the excluded value is p is equal to 0. 0 is excluded, and I lose that excluded value because I cancel that factor, which means I have to restrict x from being able to equal 0. There's my answer.